Okay, next we have a presentation called Color Us United. Kenny, is it you? Sherry, are you going to introduce him? Okay. And we have half an hour for this
All
presentation.
right, thank you. I just want to thank you guys, Mayor Volk, for allowing him to come and speak. Kenny Hsu is the president of Color Us United and desires for us truly to have a colorblind America. And so he's going to share a different viewpoint of DEI as we know it, and that's been embraced in our country. So, Kenny, I welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to address you guys, and thank you for carving up the space and time. I know you guys have a busy schedule to discuss issues that are important to the public. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is an issue that is important to the public, not because most Americans are not opposed to diversity or inclusion, but because oftentimes we sometimes have disagreements about the way that we do diversity and inclusion. And I was invited, just speaking very transparently and frankly, I was invited, by community members in Hendersonville who are concerned with DEI in Hendersonville. And I have taken the opportunity to do some research, personal research, communicating with some stakeholders, and now I have the opportunity to talk to you guys. But I will say, if you guys have questions or thoughts or comments, I would love to interact with that with you as well. So thank you for taking the time and inviting me. I wanted to give you a little bit of background about who I am and who Color Us United is. Based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, Color Us United is one of the leading national advocate nonprofits devoted to a race-blind society, where our mission is to strive for a world where all people are treated equally. That is, I think, the goal for a lot of people, regardless on what side of the political aisle they are on. We want people to be treated equally. Our definitions of equality sometimes differ, but I will say that there are some things that Americans strongly support in terms of equality. Number one is that Americans don't support equality of outcome. We don't necessarily believe that everybody should be treated so that everybody is given ends up in exactly the same place in society. We believe in equality by merit. People who work hard, who come from any background, should be able to live out the American dream. That is something I deeply believe in. And when I took on the presidency of Color Us United, we immediately started doing campaigns to reform DEI at several institutions, such as our beloved UNC Medical School, in which they were having some DEI practices that we disagreed with, which I will share. At the Salvation Army, actually, it's a national organization, but they unfortunately were teaching in their implicit bias trainings, they were teaching their members, their own Salvation Army members, that you need to apologize for and lament and ask for forgiveness in a Christian sense for being a racist. And while I believe that being a racist is a sin, and I'm a Christian myself, I don't believe that it applies to everyone at the stage that the Salvation Army was given, nor does Color Us United. So those are some examples of ways that DEI, in the name of diversity and inclusion, has actually negatively impacted people. Of course, at the Salvation Army, it caused a lot of concern among a lot of the officers who were wondering, well, am I a racist, even though I've never done any racist things? I've devoted my entire life to helping the poor. Am I still a racist? And those concerns were alerted to us. We at Color Us United, we were actually the ones who were able to get the Salvation Army to back down from that implicit bias training. They actually ended their contract with Constant Conversations, which was the racial justice nonprofit that supported those implicit bias trainings. And they actually removed the language on their website that said they were dedicated to this sort of framework. So I want to talk about, and again, feel free to interact with me on this, but I want to talk about some of the DEI programs at Hendersonville and I guess a little bit of the history based on the research that I've done. So according to SHARE, and I'm going to be transparent, according to SHARE, the city contracted with a diversity consultant called Akira Consultants. Akira Consultants is a consultancy firm based in racial justice, what they call racial justice. Now, the city hired them for over $175,000 to conduct a diversity and inclusion audit, that targeted some of their hiring practices, some of their reform practices, et cetera, et cetera. From what I know, they hired this consultancy at the period of the George Floyd incident in 2020. It was a major national tragedy. There was a lot of energy devoted into how do we fix this? How do we fix this racism problem, this problem of systemic racism that we have in America? And so, I'm not blaming the city of Hendersonville for doing this, but many cities, many counties, they contracted with consultancies like this who not promised them, but they gave them reason to say we could help with some of the inclusion problems that you have in this country. So I got a chance to review this 100-page plus document that Akira Consultants came with the city of Hendersonville. And, I will say that most of the stuff that it says on the paper, it doesn't say things that are substantially harmful. It doesn't say things that would, for example, trigger some of my code words, but it does also say nothing. It also doesn't say anything substantial either. The surveys that they conducted were anonymous. The main issues from Akira Consultants relating to the city of Hendersonville had to do with things like interpersonal communication. Some people were saying that interpersonal communication is lacking, or they felt that somebody was mistreating them. These are not systemic issues. These are issues that people deal with on a daily basis. I can't say, based on looking at the plan, based on the financial cost that taxpayers had to pay for this plan, $150,000 plus, that it was worth it. But if you go deeper into Akira Consultants, that's when you get some of the things that I think some of the residents here shared their concerns with you. Some of the things that they have said in this report or other reports in other cities, according to this one source, they recommended that the city must specifically pursue a race-based recruitment of job applicants in order to ensure a diverse candidate pool, that non-minority or Caucasian employees must accept their inherent bias towards employees of a different race or ethnicity. These are not things that I saw in this consultancy, but they're things that according to my sources, have been recommended into others. So I would be very careful about contracting with.
Mr. Duke, just to clarify, that was not in our report, correct?
I know.
That
I
is
didn't.
in somebody else's report, correct?
I didn't see that in your report.
Thank
No,
you.
I didn't see that. But yeah, but this again, this allows me to say I would be very careful about contracting with you guys with these kinds of firms or renewing contracts with these kinds of firms. And I do believe that you guys did terminate your contract with them. You ended your contract with them. That was a good thing. It saved the taxpayers money, and it ended up not promoting some of these ideologies. Yeah, that's some evidence that Akira Consultants said that, I could possibly agree with as well, although I would not say they would be saying anything substantial. Okay, so there are a couple, I know that you guys have a DEI committee. Now you have a DI committee, a diversity and inclusion committee. And among some of your recommendations is that you would provide things like a community fair for the underserved. I would question what the term underserved means in this. What do you mean by underserved? Unfortunately, when people talk about the underserved populations, they're mostly referring to Black or Latino minority populations, sometimes LGBT populations. And I would ask you to clarify what you mean by underserved. If you want to say Black and Latino populations, say Black and Latino populations. But the word underserved gives a strong connotation that, well, these communities have just been left out. And to make an assertion like that, you have to have evidence. That's where the research that my firm does at Color Us United comes in. We actually look into, are Black students being underserved in our colleges, in our public schools? And the truth of the matter is, in most cities, and I haven't done one on Hendersonville yet, I have to admit, but in most cities, such as in Baltimore, in New York City, Black students, Latino students, they're given equal funding in their schools, sometimes even more funding under Title I equity regulations. So it does not support the assertion that these students are underserved. So I would ask you to clarify what you mean by that. That's my recommendation there. One of the other recommendations that you gave was this idea of a street naming policy, evaluating streets. And again, I'm not a local, so I'm not going to tell you what you should do. But concerns have been expressed, and there are concerns that this is really just a tepid Band-Aid. It's a tepid Band-Aid in terms of real diversity, inclusion issues that you could be addressing. Street names, names of statues. These are kinds of things that more and more Americans are waking up to and are saying, these are really just Band-Aids. These are really not meant to do anything except make your city seem like it's virtuous, rather than acting actually in a virtuous way. I used to live in Richmond, Virginia, where we had these monuments, these statues of Confederate statues. These are not, I used to run by them. I was a kid, it was in the city, and these statues were taken down after 2020. Did it really do that much to help the community, or was it mainly an exercise of virtue signaling? I think it was an exercise of virtue signaling. The third thing that the city's DEI committee recommended was these leadership trainings focused on emotional intelligence, quote unquote, emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a very vague category, and I would say be careful that it doesn't fall into the kinds of implicit bias trainings that my company has had to investigate and ultimately express the voice of opposition towards. Implicit bias trainings that say things like, well, you are white, you are part of the dominant society, and therefore you must apologize for it, is unhelpful to white people, and it's also unhelpful to people. It's an inhumane way of dealing with bias problems in the workplace. It has to be a two-way street. If you're going to conduct a leadership training, you can do it without blaming certain dominant groups that fall into a purview of intersectionality, so to speak. Now, I hope that that was a little helpful in terms of the substantive critique that I have of Hendersonville's DEI programs. But ultimately, the objective that I come here today is to really express is that DEI is not good for Hendersonville. The current way that DEI has been propagated across our colleges and universities, across the public, It's growing steadily unpopular. It's becoming more popular, and it's not promoting a positive community culture. It will have, number three, a negative impact on your community and your economy. So this is a Rasmussen survey from 2024, where 72% of Republicans who were polled across the nation believe that DEI does not have a positive impact on the workplace. And 66% of independents believe DEI does not have a positive impact on the workplace. If you cater to a city and a county where there are many Republicans and many independents, you probably have to take into account these sort of numbers. I agree and I support the fact that you took out the equity portion of your DEI committee, because equity is the admission that somebody has, that we need to fight for equality of outcome. And I think that that's something that nobody can support, at least any good-hearted American can support. But the whole idea of diversity and inclusion implies to these Republicans and these independents, it implies one thing. And that one thing is anti-white discrimination. Because in order to believe in DEI, you have to believe that as it is in our county today, in our city today, that we are structurally a racist place. And if you're going to make that claim that we are a structurally racist place, then you have to supply it with evidence. You have to supply it with evidence. You have to show that certain policies are causing racist outcomes. If you don't do that, then how people are going to interpret it is you are actively trying to change the culture to make it more towards your preferred groups. And in that way, DEI becomes the opposite of what you are trying to fight for, which is true equality. If you signal preference to your groups, you are fighting against real equality. And I know that that is a hard thing to swallow, because, we believe that we are virtuous, all of us do, but we do have to fight for true equality ideals. I can list statistics about that as well. I can list statistics about how white men feel forgotten by DEI. 81% of your constituents are white. But ultimately, if you continue on this path, you are going to encounter this sort of opposition. And it's not an opposition that you can easily dismiss. That's the point of these statistics. So think, and this will be the last thing that I say, because your time is very valuable, but I'm here for questions as well. But think, do your constituents, do your policies truly promote inclusivity across not just the racial dichotomy, but across every dichotomy? Age, locals. You have a community college pipeline here in Hendersonville. So if DEI asks for certain races or asks for an ensuring of certain races to be promoted into hiring, where are you going to get those people? Ultimately, because of the population of this place, because of the population of Hendersonville, you're going to have to go outside Hendersonville. And that means that if you're going to go outside Hendersonville, you're not promoting people from within your own community colleges. You're not promoting people who were born and bred here, who are local here. Those are some things that you should consider. If you're going to ask for certain racial considerations, who's left out? Do your constituents approve of this program? Do you acknowledge the growing opposition to D&I? Do you acknowledge the reasoning behind the opposition to D&I? Would your program pass a ballot initiative? If you actually gave a ballot out to constituents and asked them, Would you support policies, and be very specific with your wording, would you support policies that reward these minority groups, Black, Hispanic, LGBTQ, at the expense of these minority groups? Would they pass that ballot initiative? And I will tell you, in the state of California, where they tried to do something like that, the state of California, they tried to pass a ballot initiative called Proposition 16 that would do that in their colleges and universities, prefer certain applicants of certain races at the expense of other applicants of certain races. In the state of California, 58% of those people voted no. So this is not an issue that is cleanly divided in a partisan way. Finally, you should consider, is this program really the right thing that you want to do for Hendersonville? I acknowledge that in things that I've seen from you guys, that you have said things like, we need to do more to attract younger people to come to Hendersonville. And I'm a young person. A lot of people coming outside of Charlotte, we love coming into the mountains. We love coming here for the education system. We love coming here for the good roads. Diversity and inclusion is very low on that list. And if it is higher, we should have the evidence for that. But in your heart, I ask that you strongly consider the principled opposition to DEI,